I had done a trip to Alaska in 2019, and just at the last minute, uh, well, when I was finished with the trip, I put together a PowerPoint presentation, which I'd never done before, because I was helping my mother in hospice and I had plenty of time. So I just sort of did that. And for 4 years, I've never actually given the talk. It was sitting in my computer. So I pulled it out this morning and try to update it a little bit. So be gentle with me if it's not the most professional. And I came across this particular video and I got really excited. So I want to share that with you first. It's the TV. I'm sorry it's blinking. We can't do anything.
There he is. Nice job. Nice job.
Holy sh!
When their backs are turned, run, run, run with the railroad. When their backs are turned, run, run, run with the railroad. When their backs are turned, run, run, run with the railroad.
Nice, nice.
Get out of their sight. When the engine turns, then you gotta move on, and you gotta move on at night. Oh, 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 not a sound. Not a sound. Not a sound. Not a sound.
What is it? Look at the size of that handprint.
So
Come on, kids, it's time to go home.
Oh, no,
We're having too much fun.
There's a bear. Wait.
So anyway, that is what got me very excited about doing this trip. Sorry for the blinking thing. We just can't do anything about that. I'm lucky the guys online are not seeing that, right? All right. So what the Ludi, who's the owner of the lodge, told me is that these rainbow trout in the Antioch River never go out and become steelhead. And what I didn't realize, and he told me this, is that if the rivers drain down into the Bering Sea, which is down on the left here, the rainbow just stay in place. They don't become steelhead. And if it drains down to the Gulf of Alaska, they go out, become steelhead, and come back. So these rainbows get really big because they just hang out forever. And in the Antioch River in particular, here's they get these big spots and they call them the leopard rainbow trout. They're a rainbow, but they're a little variation there. In the Antioch River, they do not have a place to winter over in a lake or anything like that. So they hang out, they're under the ice sheet, and they're waiting for the salmon to arrive. And that doesn't happen until about July. But after ice out, the main protein source that they have are these lampreys or rodents that are trying to get across the river. So they are looking out for these mice. And they are all over them if they see them. So the mouse season for the Antioch Lodge is about the third week in June. And that's when it's just getting pretty cold and it's not quite warmed up. I went the last week of June, the first week of July. And by the time the salmon show up, they just switch over to salmon eggs and they don't look at the mice very much. So I wanted specifically to do the mousing. I try to figure that out. So they've got a couple different species. They've got Dolly Varden. They've got grayling. Thank you. But what I really appreciate about the trip is how much fun the casting is. There, you can go there as an intermediate caster and have a really good time. The fish are located under these big old things of wood there. They just love the structure. In fact, you'll hardly find them anywhere else but underneath the structure. And you want to cast usually at a 45-degree angle, and you're going to swing down, and you want to put your mouse right in front of this pile of wood. And the closer that you can get, the better. So if you're a good caster and you can, get the furthest reaches and sort of pull it in, you're going to catch more fish. But even a borderline caster would still have a really good time because the guides, they've got these power boats. They hang out above these piles of wood, and they just sort of set you up for the right kind of thing. So they know where the wood piles are. They know where the trout are, and then you'll go drifting down the river to the next spot, and you'll pick your spots with a log or something like that, and drop your fly behind it. And the most memorable fish that I have for the whole trip were the ones where it was a really fun cast to get into it. The two I remember the most is when our guide took us off up to a little stream, and we walked upstream for a ways. And he said, there are trout right behind that log right there, and there's this big old bush behind me. And it was about a 40-foot cast. And so I did single-hand spay and dropped it behind the log and got a couple of trout out in there. He was very excited about that. He'd never had a client do single-hand spay for him before. And my second favorite one was when we were drifting down the river, and it was about a 70-foot cast to pop it behind the log. And boy, that was fun. All right, so here we go. We got going for more slides here. So flying into Anchorage, I just had to show you this. This is my favorite place to go in Anchorage. It is a champagne oyster bar called the Bubbly Mermaid. And I go there before and after. Unfortunately, it did not survive COVID, but that was my favorite place. So let's go. We'll try this one. It's not advancing. Let's go. There we go. Hopefully this will work now. All right, just you have to take a flight to Aniak. And here is Aniak. It's halfway in between Anchorage and the Bering Sea. The only way to get there is to get on a boat in the Bering Sea and go upriver 100 miles, or fly in. And it turns out that all of their supplies for the lodge have to be brought upriver. And I got there the first day, a day before everyone else, and Ludi told me they had all their supplies was 2 months late arriving. And the day I was there, he got a phone call saying, "Oh, well, our barge just got grounded about 10 miles downstream, and they had to wait for another barge to come and unload it halfway to get it out of there." So anyway, not the easiest place to get to. The flight goes over some beautiful glaciers, and you can see them melting and follow the very dirty river. So this is the Kuyak River that the Aniak goes down into. You got my phone over there? Is that my phone? Yep. Let me double check the name on that one. It was, oh, anyway, it was really, really dirty, and it was really big. The time that we were there, it was actually flowing at 69,000 CFS. So this is a little airport. I got there a day ahead of time. This is when the crew arrived the next day, and we picked them up. And we found these gals. They were so cute. They were Girl Scouts between high school and college, and they were traveling from little town to little town and doing presentations for the locals. I just thought they were cute. And that's their local grocery store. So I got there a day ahead of time, and I got to stay in what they call their bed and breakfast overnight. I was the only one there, and this is their bed and breakfast. And I got to do my own fishing on one day. I got a day early because the flights were booked for completely booked up. So here's the bathroom. Do you ever see, Alaska Native, whatever that show with the guys go out there, when they go out there and salvage stuff? Anyway, this is the bathroom door. I just thought that was funny. So this is what they call their main lodge, and that's right on the shore of the Kukiak River, which is right there. It's huge. It's really, really wide. It's pretty shallow, though. It's just got filled up with silt. And so my first day there, I got my own guide, and we went out and we went fishing for pike on these little side rivers there. Really muddy. So I caught 3 that day. So that was the first species they had. That was only on the lower stretches. When we got further up the Aniak, we were not fishing for pike. And what we were doing is we'd get clousers, and we'd cast them as close to shoreline as possible, and we would strip them in. And the funny thing was, I kept stripping them in. As it got close to the boat, all of a sudden they were gone. And I'd strip them in, and then they were gone. Well, the guide told me that, well, you didn't hook them. I said, well, I had them on. They're like, they bite onto it, and they're holding on with their teeth. And when they see the boat, they release it. So you didn't actually hook it. And I wasn't sure if I should believe him or not, but I'll show you something later and you'll see. The second half of the day, I caught my first sheefish. I had never heard of them. They are only native to the Bering Sea. There's some in Russia. And then in Aniak and a couple other rivers, they are a whitefish, the largest of the whitefish. And what we did was we located them where they were surface spawning, where some of the other rivers came into the Kukuyak and casted them. And the way we were fishing for the sheefish, we'd cast out with clousers and I'd swing it. And you had to set the hook when you felt the tug, but they had this really, really sensitive, soft mouth. And if you set it too hard, you pull it right through their mouth. And if you weren't fast enough, you'd lose them. So it was really tricky, but I managed to catch 3. And they said that was pretty good on a sunny day, and that was the biggest one. Later in the trip, one of the one of the people in the group, they kept one, and we had it for dinner, and it tasted like halibut. It was really yummy. So the whole group arrived we had a whole section of boats. These are really flat bottomed, and they have to be, because when you're going up the river, some spots of the river are just like 6 inches deep, and you have to go over those areas and through them. So they've got really shallow drafts. And I sort of stuck the GPS program on when we did it. This is the 21 miles it took to get from the main lodge up to our mid lodge. It took a few hours, and a lot of people stopped and fished on the way. And you can sort of see, it's a terrible screen, but those houses up there are the mid lodge. Oh, what's happening there? No, I don't remember that. Let me see here. No, I don't think we can do it on this one. Okay. So more pike. And here was what I was going to show you. It might be hard to see, but this pike wrapped itself up. If you can see it right in here, the line is wrapped around it. And he actually didn't even have the hook in his mouth. He just wrapped himself up. I just thought that the guide was right. That's what happens when they release there at the last minute. So what I thought was really fascinating when I was going up the river on that 3-hour trip up there is, you know how the rivers, they naturally go around and the outer edge is eroding and the inner edge is got your gravel beds. Well, you'd see these trees that are falling in, and every time you go around the corner on the outer edge, you'd see these trees that are falling over, and they're gradually falling and falling until they drop. And there's some more trees that are falling in. It just really interested me how far they could lean before they actually released. And so this is where the wood comes from that the trout like to hang out underneath. And the guides go up there about 2 or 3 weeks before any of the guests come up there, and they go and they break up the log jams with chainsaws and all sorts of stuff to clear it away. There's some more, and there should be some trout underneath that. And every once in a while, we'll come across an area that looks like, and that's actually tundra. And you can see that there's hardly any trees there. It's not very lush. It's very poor soil. And we just came to the edge of the river, and that was the tundra. I just thought that was really interesting. So here is the main lodge. It just has this dirt boat launch. And this is the tundra silt that everything is on top of. And they have to lay the walkways on top of that, because if you tried to walk through it, you'd probably go down to your knees. And when you go on the walkways, everything's just sort of like bouncing as you're going along. And you go into the main lodge and you feel the whole lodge bouncing as you're stepping in there. And the lodge, if you can kind of see it on this picture, it's up on these sort of stilt-like things. They stack up the logs and they level it. And that's the interior there. Let me see here. Yeah, every day we had 2 professional chefs. They served breakfast, they packed the lunch, and they served dinner. 7:30 breakfast, 7:30 dinner. And when we got off the water, we always had really cool snacks. One time we had suckling pig. That was pretty cool. And then one time we had pizza, and it turned out that pizza oven was on the barge and showed up on day 3 when the barge finally arrived. There's the other side of the interior where we all hang out, had fly tying table. Not a lot of supplies, but I did tie some of my flies. And the guy on the right is Bruce, and he was my favorite guide. And that's our cabins. The last cabin on the left was sort of the husband and wife cabin, but all the other cabins had just a single person bed on either side. They had 2 twin beds in there. And here is how they leveled off the cabins. And Alaskan bush people, they were doing the same thing. That's what really I thought was funny. They just sort of bury these logs to try to get out of the silt, and then they level it with other logs. In fact, the guy was telling us that one year they showed up about 6 years earlier, and the river had moved. And all of the cabins were about 800 feet away from the river. And so they had to hand drag one by one the cabins, and they threw ropes over their shoulders, and the guides they threw logs out as rollers, and they'd roll the things one by one and to drag it 800 feet over. I just thought that was a great story. Here is another one of those big old long jams. This is the biggest one, and we actually caught a dozen fish out of this thing. And here's some of the mouse patterns. The Moorish mouse is the one that's tied with the foam on the back and the deer hair that's spun and then clipped. And I asked Bruce, I said, Bruce, why do you have that red spot on the bottom of that? And I expected him to say, oh, that's a hot spot. He said, well, about 6 years ago, we had this really plentiful rainy year. We had all sorts of grain and the mice got hemorrhoids. And ever since we imitated that, we just caught more fish. I'm okay, all right. So here, hopefully I can play this video here. Here we go. Oh, what? What is that? What happened? I've got a picture here. Okay, that's not working. All right. That did not work. It probably would on my laptop if I had slides on it. Some more patterns. We had Dolly Varden. That's the top right one in the olive in white. That was most commonly the streamer that we slid underneath. Sometimes we did the black and white one, and sometimes the purple, but the olive and white, I think that was imitate those lampreys. And what we would do is we would have, in the morning, we would have one person on the boat with the mouse pattern on, and the buddy in the back usually had streamer on. And so that the first thing the fish saw was the mouse sliding across in front of the pile, and then the streamer would slide into the pile. And it was kind of interesting because you'd think you'd hang up all the time when you take the streamer and you're sliding it under all these piles, but those things are floating on top of the water. And we sometimes were sliding them back in that last pile 20 feet. And sometimes it would hang up and the guy would tell us, do not try to release that on your own. They had this little pop technique that I couldn't do, but they'd get in there and they would grab the line and they'd pop it a certain way. It had 20-pound test, and then check the hook and they straighten if they need to. And then we just kept fishing with that fly. So that's one that I tied up. It had a dragon tail. It did really well until I finally lost it. Yeah, I think the reason I lost it had this really firm hook that didn't have any give, so it didn't pop off. And that's my my dry bag I take with me everywhere. You guys have probably seen it on trips with me. I kept it in the boat with me, and you'll see how that applies later. So another pile. This is a video that shows Pete, Peter, my buddy, fishing buddy, actually sliding the streamer under there. We'll see if we can make this go. There we go. This goes. Hard to see. There we go. He's casting. And he's sliding it underneath those piles of wood. You can see it going through there. The guide's got the boat running above there. He keeps adjusting the speed to keep the right distance. So no bite that time. So let it hang at the bottom. All right.
freeway? Yeah, you just pop off.
So that was one of the more fun ones here. No, stop. Go further. Here we go. So, yep, caught a bunch of grayling. And sometimes, you know, they were annoying because you would see these big old rainbow and you'd slide your fly through and the grayling would pick it up. But what I found was so interesting is how slow growing are. 20-inch grayling is 30 years old. Grayling were the only thing that took dry flies, and we'd see these hatches and we were like, why aren't the rainbow taking them? They don't. The grayling do. So we were mostly fishing with 7-weights. That's what they recommended, to try to pull those big old rainbows out from those piles. But they said bring along a 5-weight in case you want to do some dry fly fishing for grayling. And the other thing we were catching was a dolly varden, and sometimes those were pain too. When you first are pulling them out, those ventral fins were bright white, and the longer you have them out, the more stress they get, the more and more dark orange red they get, which I think is pretty interesting. Let's see. This is Captain Ron. He's a vet who has his own guide company back in Alabama or something like that. And we had quite the adventure together. He's pretty fun. So the third day of our trip, let's see, we were supposed to see the mid lodge there, and I have on that map the tent camp, quite a ways on upstream, because each of the guides had their own beats, and some of them were below the mid lodge, and some of them were way upstream. And so a lot of times we were supposed to move up to the tent camp, and they didn't open it up for us because the mosquitoes were so terrible. And so that year they'd never seen anything like it. Fortunately, I brought mosquito netting. I had never used it before. I got one of those ones that had the hat when you snap it and you pull the netting down. Except I didn't realize you're supposed to snap it back up again. And so I had the netting sort of lying on my forehead. So the first night, and it's not when you're on the water in the middle of the river, it's when you go off on these little excursions and you walk out there on these cool things. They're just everywhere. But anyway, I got back to my camp and my whole forehead was red. It's like, was I allergic to the netting or what was going on? Because I just like had this rash there. The next day it was itching so bad, I realized that it was actually completely coalesced mosquito bites completely across my forehead. So I didn't have any steroid cream with me, so I squirted some nasal steroid spray on my forehead and it worked. All right. So I think this is another, this is just sort of, get this going here. There we go. This is like to take these boats. It's a little scary. You're flat bottom and you're going around these corners at really high speeds, but it's pretty fun. And you watch real close because we saw moose, we saw a young brown bear, we saw lots of osprey and bald eagles. So there's a lot of wildlife that you can spot and keep an eye on it. So that was just sort of what it was like on those boats. All right, let's see here. Where are we? All right, so I had to be rescued. That was the second to last day of the trip. We were going up this stretch right here, and we we're way, way upstream, and all of a sudden the motor died. And so Ron told Peter to throw a little anchor over the back while we're moving back down river. And the anchor was one of these piles of chains. And when you threw it over the back, it would just sort of slow you down for a little while, it'd stop, and then release and let you go down. So we spent about half an hour slowly working on our way back down the river, and he could not get that motor going again. And I was pretty worried because those corners that you get to are just absolutely filled with these piles of wood. And powering it, going down there without any power would have been quite scary. So I must have been half an hour into it. We finally slowly worked our way down to this gravel bar here. And we're like, okay, well, that would be a perfect place to get over there. Except all I had was a single paddle. he didn't have a set of oars. So here's Ron in the front of the boat with his paddle trying to get us over to this gravel bar before we lost the corner and got past the gravel bar, because that would have been bad. So here's the wood pile, and you see that little spit there? That's the end of the gravel bar. That was the last chance for us to land on that thing. And we had to wait till we got past this wood pile before he could paddle hard. And we just barely made it. And so we pulled over, and he had me and Peter build a fire while he tried to get the motor going. Well, he did not have any sort of satellite phone. I had a satellite phone, but I left it in the lodge. Yeah, but I did have my fire starting supplies inside my red bag. And so he had a flare gun. And so he said, okay, well, I can send off a flare. He says, here in Alaska, if you say hi to somebody, you raise one hand. He says, if you're trying to ask for help, you raise both hands. And he said, and we hate the tourists that wave hi with both hands because we think that they need help. So he says, well, if you see somebody, do this. So we had a plane fly over, and he was trying to decide whether he should do his flare gun. He decided not to, and later he said, oh no, I wish I had. So, but turns out right next to the gravel bar were some salmon. Now, we had not been able to fish for salmon that entire trip, and the king salmon were just coming in, and there was this line of them right now. So we got out and we were fishing for king salmon. And there's a nice rainbow. We were using pink Dolly Varden because kings like pink. But there was my first king, and I caught it on a 7-weight rod, and it was not easy to land. And you notice that he is keeping it in the water. Well, when we were oriented, Ludi said, the kings are not open to catching this. They did not open king season. He said, do not pick a king up if you catch it, don't target them. But if you catch it, if you hold it up, and they got a picture of you holding it up, you'll be, and the fishing game finds that on the phone, on your phone, you will be charged $5,000 for poaching. And he said the lodge will be charged $50,000. Do not take a picture of a king out of the water. So we caught a few. I ended up catching 8 king salmon. And finally, the lodge decided when we didn't show up at 5:30, that was the drop dead time. If you didn't show up, everyone's going to come look for you. No, that wasn't it. So yeah, this was 4 years ago, so I got to remember this story. So Ron and Peter decided to go way on the other side of the gravel bar and go fishing. I was alone right there, and I hear a boat, and it was Bruce. Bruce is the only person who had his beat above ours, and we weren't sure if he's coming or not. And as I hear him, I hook this king salmon, and he's coming upstream, and I'm trying to land it so I can wave to Bruce. And he's coming up, and I'm like, I'm trying to see if I can raise 2 arms, and I can only get one up. And so it's like, try to put the rod underneath my armpit to see if I can do this. And I was like, okay, do I let the fish go and get saved, or do I catch the fish and maybe miss it? And I was debating it when finally Ron set off his flare gun and saved the day, and Bruce came over. So I didn't have to make a decision there. So we couldn't get it going. The head guide came up when we didn't show up at 5:30. And we were supposed to jump in the boat and head back down. But we tried to get on Bruce's boat, and we could only get his two people on there. They stopped and caught some king salmon. We can only add 1 more person. So I volunteered to stay because I wanted to catch 10 king salmon. I had only caught 8. And so I stayed with Ron and fished for a little longer. So anyway, that was my adventure. So this was the pile that we fished at the last day. This was our most productive day. And we caught a dozen huge rainbow out of that pile on that last day. And I think it was because it was warming up, the fish got really active. So there's a beautiful sunset. And that was Alaska. Anybody have any questions? No questions about mousing?
So, like this was, like you said, 4 years ago. Have you tried to go back or wanted to go back?
I've wanted to go back. It just hadn't worked out for that. And I heard from Ludi that when they had those big old fires up there, that they went up there afterwards and all of their cabins were gone. So they have sort of like a high level tent kind of thing going now, to put their guests in. So that was sad to hear. But he did contact me when they had a single woman that didn't have a partner if I wanted to come up for that, but I was otherwise busy.
How much was the trip? 7 days?
I think it came to like with airfare, it came to like $10,000 for everything. It was a 7-day trip. But if you counted in the airfare and going to and from Anchorage, it came back to $10,000 for me. Not cheap. Plus the tips for the guides and everything.
Did you catch most of them on the mouse?
Most of them we caught on the Dalai Lamas when we were sliding with the streamer. The mouse was more fun, but the Dalai Lama caught more fish. No, I'm not sure. Well, the Dalai Lama kind of went underneath the wood piles, whereas the mouse was going in front of it. So if the fish were hanging right underneath there, they would see the mouse, but otherwise you were getting more fish to see the Dalai Lama. I understand that there's some mousing that you can do for brown trout and other rivers in Oregon. Tends to be right at dusk and dark. So it's something that is possible in Oregon if you know when to go and where.
They keep fish all night. You better know the river. It's kind of scary. It's fun.
So if anybody on Zoom has a question, I'll let you unmute yourself if you like. Beth will be able to hear you. Or you chat.
So you said that, like, they asked you because there was a single woman, do they recommend having partners?
Well, you're sharing one of those cabins with another person. So I had mine all to myself, and Peter had his all to himself because we were the only two that didn't show up with somebody else, and that's why we were put in the boat together. Everyone else, it was a group of 4, a group of 2, or whatever. So what was the question on the?
No,
There was no question on the YouTube? I mean, on the chat?
no, there wasn't.
Okay. Any other questions?
So what's your next trip?
I want to get back down to Pyramid Lake in the spring, and if my foot allows it, I will. I was supposed to go this fall, but I missed out on my entire Klamath Lake summer because of this injury. So.
Well, thanks to Beth. She kind of stepped in at the last minute. Our program speaker came down sick. And so Beth pulled this one out of the
Of the old laptop, I had to had to move it over because that one was mostly busted. Oops. All right.